Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another strategic alignment event with our good friends over at Nativ and YPS, along with Rabbi Karmi Ingber. We had a wonderful time last week where he spoke about Mashiach, conceptions and misconceptions, and today he's got a hot topic for us. He's going to talk about the three roots of personality and of world events. And I wonder if he's got anything to say on the Ukraine situation there. So, yeah, it's on the top of my list to want to hear his feedback on that. So, let's just jump right in and see how Rabbi Ingber's doing today.
Hey, hi, everybody. How are we all doing? We're doing well?
Got you 5x5, Rabbi.
Great. All right, wonderful. Okay, so today's topic is the roots of personality, and we're going to see how it affects the world. Okay, so it's a kind of a deep topic, but it's also very practical. So I want to just jump right into it. We got to understand one thing. The way a human being is built is really the key to understanding the way the world's built. It's a very, very deep idea. But when God created the world, he wants us to have understanding of the world. And therefore, there's a verse in the book of Job, in Eov. It says, Mi b'sari echsel okal. From my own self, I get the understanding of the entire world. Mi b'sari echsel okal. I can understand God's. I understand how God built the whole world. So when we look at ourselves, we understand how we function, and we understand that's a parallel to everything. So I want to talk about the traits that build us, that we have to work on, and I'm going to show you how all of our traits is built on these three central roots of traits, and how it's affecting the world, how nations choose different traits, and how that causes the situations in the world that we have. So let's understand like this. We have a head. Okay, our mind has things that are goals, and we think of the processes that we have to be able to go and to get what we want to get, have ideas. But then we come down from our minds to our bodies. And the top half of our body, our torso and arms, represent the part of us that takes the map and brings it into the world. And it's not an accident we have a right hand, a left hand, and a torso. These are the roots of bringing things into the world, and they are really the deeper understanding of our traits. So let's go like this. A right hand. What does the right hand do? So this is, by the way, if you're a lefty, your right becomes your left. It just means your stronger hand. We have one hand that's stronger, one hand's weaker. Why is that? Most people have a stronger and weaker hand. The stronger hand, which we'll call the right, if you're lefty, it's your left, is the idea of giving. Okay? It's the idea of getting out of ourselves and giving to others. It's called chesed, kindness. And that's why it's the stronger hand. Okay? The stronger hand is the one that we go and we give out into the world. Chesed, kindness. Now, kindness is how it kind of all starts. Chesed is how things start, because to get out in the world, I need to expand. I got to take my ideas and bring them out into the world. So now I want to give somebody, but can I ever give in a way that's bad? Yes. For all you people pleasers out there, and there are many of us, we realize that sometimes we give people and we're actually hurting them. Okay? Sometimes you don't want to say no to somebody, but that's not a good thing. You have to know how to limit and say no. That's your left hand. And that's why it's the weaker hand. Because the idea of saying no and the limitation is important. If it's not in place, you can harm somebody. If you don't know how to say no, somebody asks you for money. Like my brother runs a charity in Israel. And my brother does not go and give money to people. He goes and he has volunteers and he buys the food. He only gives them the food. Why does he do that? Because he's afraid, he wants to make sure they have healthy food. So he doesn't want to give people money, and then they'll buy things that are not as good and not realized. So he makes sure that, no, I want to give, but I'm giving in a limited way. I want to make sure you get good, healthy food. So I'm limiting it. I'm saying I'm going to buy it. Our volunteers are going to buy the food for you, make sure it's good, healthy. That's the limitation. That's your left hand. So the right hand is you're giving, your kindness. The left hand says you want to give to someone, you got to sometimes say no. You give your kid, but if you don't ever say no to your child, you're harming the child. Then there is the balance, the middle, which is called in the Torah Tiferes, beauty or truth. And that is the perfect balance between, yes, giving, no limiting, and then the balance of it saying, I'm always going to do what's right. I'm not leaning either way. These three traits are the root of all traits. And if you think about it, you can figure out in yourself, what is your prime trait? Are you naturally a giver? Are you somebody that wants to always give people? And then what is your sub-trait? Are you someone who cares about truth? And then I want what's true? And then, but I want to give as a subcategory of that. Am I someone who is very exacting and limiting and I want to do things just right? It's kind of like in today's language, you'd have the person who's, they have what's called FOMO, right? FOMO is the guy who doesn't want to miss out. Like if you want to go and I want to sell something to somebody, there's two ways to do it. One is you say, this is going to be the greatest thing you ever had. That's a right-hand person. That's the giver. The second guy says, you don't want to miss this. This is so great, you don't want to miss it. That's the left hand. Okay? It's right and left. Now, with this introduction, we're going to see some amazing things. The forefathers of the world, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are these three traits. They bring these three traits into the world. Let's understand how that works. Abraham, and this is so great. I mean, I have some people here from my synagogue that we started in Atlanta, and they know the whole style, and I did it intentionally, was that Abraham was the greatest of the givers. He started a revolution. He came along and said, here, I'm coming to my house, I'm going to give you, I'm going to share with you. I'm going to, why? Because God gives us. Why are we alive? We're alive because God created us. He loves us. He wants for our good. So Abraham all of a sudden brings this message to the world, and people think this is crazy. How is this possible that this person is just opening it? It says his tent was open on all four sides. How is that possible? And he wasn't even asking any money. All he would say was the end. He would say, now the people would say, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the one who gave it to us. And they would say, who's that? And he would say, that's God. And they were like, wow. So Abraham brought into the world, he brought God into the world by showing everyone that the goal of the creation was kindness, to give us. And it was a revolution. And by the way, it was the greatest revolution in history. Because today, as I mentioned last week, most people do believe that there's one God, and whatever confusions they may have, what that means. But, in the old days, they were all worshiping idols and powers and this and that. Today, that's the person who is recognized as an intelligent human being doesn't believe in multi-gods. That was Abraham's revolution. But the way he brought it in the world was kindness. He said, God created me. He loves us. He wants to give. And I'm a representative of that. I give kindness. And that's what he did. And what happened was Abraham had a tremendous following. Tremendous. It says that the Nefesh HaSubuchar, people just gathered around him. They never saw anything like it. They never heard anything like this. And they said, wow, if that's the way the world is, then I want to be part of this. If that's what God is, I want to be part of this. That was Avraham's revolution of kindness. Now, Avraham had a son whose name was Yitzchak, right? Now, Yitzchak had a very different approach. And that's why the sages asked, where did all the students of Avraham go? He had all of these followers, all the people that were converting or with him, where'd they all go? And the sages tell us when his son took over, they eventually left. They didn't like Yitzchak's approach. Yitzchak's approach was like, hey, do the thing right. Avram's approach was, here it is. And Yitzchak said, yeah, okay, but like now you gotta do it right. You can't just go and everything's good. So the people, they didn't like that so much. They were like, yeah, Avram was fun, right? Right, kids? You imagine, someone's giving you all the good stuff's great. All of a sudden the guy's, hey, sit up nice, sit at the table. What are you doing? People don't like that. Now, Yitzchak's quality, therefore, was the self-restraint called the left hand. Now, I want to be clear of that. The self-restraint means really controlling yourself. It means a person and I'm sure you know this, you've seen this. There are people who are very expansive. A lot of times they're a little bit messy, they have ideas, they're expanding. And there's some people that are very precise, very exact. And you kind of need both. Yitzchak was that. He was the person who was exactly on himself. He never wanted to do the wrong thing. He was very, very controlled and had restraint in his own activities, and therefore others too. Now, I want to tell you an amazing thing here. The sages tell us that if Abraham had a child that followed in his path, the world would have blown up. The world could never have succeeded. You know why? Could you imagine a world where I tell you, I love you, and whatever you do is okay? So in the beginning, it's great. Wow, I love this. But after a while, there's the people who are doing negative things won't stop because everything's okay. So if Yitzchak would have taken Abraham's approach, the world couldn't handle it. It was a perfect balance. It was the right hand and the left hand. Abraham was all about giving, and Yitzchak said, okay, this is great, but there's got to be a limit to it. Now, this means that Abraham and Yitzchak really had the approach that we all need to do. Because you might be a giver, but if you're only giving, you're going to hurt people and yourself. That's why Abraham had 10 tests. What were his 10 tests? And all of his tests were in the quality of restraint, of, hey, you're a loving, giving person, but you got to say no sometimes. All of his tests. He had to kick out his son Yishmael, who he loved dearly, right? He had to leave his old father to go to the land of Israel. They're all the same. They were all things that nice people don't do. But sometimes, even if you're a nice person, I got to do this. Otherwise, I'm not doing the right thing. There's all his tests till the final test. What was his final test? Was to take his beloved son, who's waited his whole life, and bring him up as an offering. For a person like Abraham, that's impossible for anybody. But for the ultimate giver, this act was. But it said yes, because it's the act of saying no for the greater purpose. Otherwise, I'm not helping. And we have to realize, guys, what I'm telling you today, this is some high philosophy here, and there's going to be a lot of deep things in the world, but this is very practical to our lives. Because if you're always that giver, you must get yourself to say no. Otherwise, you're not helping others and you're not helping yourself. And that's what Avram did. Now, Yitzchak, fascinatingly enough, and that's why Avram became whole. That's why after the 10th test, it says in the text, God says, now I know you're Yirat Elokim. You fear God. It means because love and fear are these two components. Love is the expansion, and fear is, awe is, I got a limit. I mentioned this in a class I was giving last week. I was once I was in the park, and there was this kid. He was throwing a football to this older guy, And the kid was throwing, he's going, Billy, go long. And he throws the ball to Billy, and and Billy dropped the ball. And the kid screamed, Billy, come on. And I was thinking it was really weird, Billy's this older guy, and the kid is. And then I found out that Billy was the father. And I said, that's no good. The law is you can't call your father and your mother by their first names. You know why? Because you have to love your parents, but if you love them and you don't have a sense of that they're your parents, you skew the relationship and you have a problem. That's love is like the gas pedal, and awe is the brakes. So like in life, you go forward, you say, you feel love to God, but then if you have no awe and you don't stay back and say, look at the starry skies, it's unbelievable. If you don't have that awe, then you have a wrong sense of God and everything. The wrong sense of your parents, wrong sense of God, because they're my buddy. No, there has to be both. There's a gas pedal, and when you go forward and you give, you have to brake, and then take a moment of awe, and then you can go forward again, right? A car without a gas pedal is very boring. And a car without brakes, I had one like that. That's not recommended. Okay, so that was Abraham was the giver. Yitzchak was the quality of restraint. And now Yitzchak has to become a whole person also. How does he become whole? Yitzchak was so nervous that he would do the wrong thing. He was always self-analyzing, restricting. How do I limit? How do I act this right way? He did it so much until the point where he said, one of the qualities of being a right person is to be a giver. And because he was so concerned with being whole and so nervous he wouldn't be exactly right, he then forced himself to become the giver also. And that's the same thing for all of us. If you're somebody that's always challenging yourself and saying, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? You're very, self-analyzing and very concerned about it. Then you have to say to yourself, one of the qualities I need to become this person I want to be is to be also sometimes expansive. And then Yitzhak pushed himself. And that's what the text says. He went and he brought offerings in Beersheba. That means he pushed himself to get out of his limitations. And he became whole too. Now we're going to take this idea and we're going to bring this into incredible world history. And what I'm going to tell you soon, you're going to be shocked, and you're going to question if what I'm saying can even possibly be true, because it's going to be so incredibly amazing what we're going to talk about. So now, Abraham has a child before Yitzchak is born, and his name is Yishmael. And Yishmael is the father of the Arab nation. Now, as all people, there's good traits and bad traits. The sages tell us Yishmael's trait that he learned from Abraham was kindness. That's what he learned from him. And like, my brother years and years ago traveled in North Africa. And he told me, he said there was a rule that they had in the Arab countries. They had to take you in for 3 days. Fourth day, not so much. You had to be careful the fourth day sometimes. But 3 days, they learned from Abraham an idea of kindness. Now, if kindness is not balanced, it could become very, very bad. If you notice here, those I'll give an example here. When people are, let's say, they used to have a song in 1969. It was an old song about, if you can't be with the one you love, free love, free love, free love. Now, that is a problem. Because if you're like an expansive person, but you don't have boundaries, you could actually come to very negative things. And this is what the sages they call kindness that's fallen into the impurity stage. And even though Yishmael was the descendant of Abraham, and he had kindness, but it wasn't balanced. And therefore, there was a lack of parameters. There was a lack of, they could come to theft. You know why? Because people who are like, yeah, I'm expansive, yeah, it's all that. So there's no boundaries. So, hey, so this is yours. What do you care? What do I care? That is the negative side of kindness. When it's not balanced, it leads to illicit relations. It leads to theft. It's a whole mindset. And that came out from Avraham when it was not in the perfect situation. And that was his descendant Yishmael, who had a lot of good qualities and a lot of ideas of giving, but giving that wasn't always so good, and giving in places he shouldn't give. Now, who was the other side? The other side was Yitzchak, who was limitations, self-restraint, self-control, boundaries. And he has two sons. He has Esav, and Jacob, who's the father of Jewish people. Now, who is Esav the father of? Esau, it says he is at least the spiritual, question if he's the physical, but the spiritual leader of what's going to become Rome. That's going to be Rome in the future. Now, what was Rome? Rome was exactly like Yitzchak. It was control, but instead of being control over the self, what was it? Control over others. And that's why he was the warrior. Rome were warriors, right? They create war. That's what they're about. Because their quality was control, but misplaced control, not holy control. It was not control in a way that was on me. It was control on you. And therefore, the nation that came out from Yitzchak that was not perfectly balanced was his descendant Esav, who became known as the Torah text tells us. It says he is the father of Edom. Edom is going to be Rome. Now, the word Edom means red. You know why it's red? Red is blood and fire and anger. So you got two qualities of the right hand and left hand. When they're misused, Abraham, it's great. He's the giver. He balanced himself. He became whole. Yitzchak is self-restraint. He balanced himself, became expansive also. But when those two things are not balanced right, you get the quality that Yishmael has, giving but not proper. It has not the right boundaries. And then you have Esav, who is control, but it's not control in the productive way. It's controlling others, and that's war and anger. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit. You're going to be shocked at what I tell you now, probably. But the sages tell us an amazing thing. The word, you know what happened in Rome, right? Rome was an empire, and then Rome took on a religion that became the Holy Roman Empire, took on Christianity. Now, fascinating enough, the name Esav, when you flip the letters around in the text, the word Esav, it spells the name Yeshu, which was the Hebrew name of Jason. Fascinating. That means that the spiritual leader, Esav, it became the Rome, which became Christianity. And now watch something so even more amazing. Look at the two religions that were created now from Yishmael and from Esav. Yishmael, who is the giver without the boundaries, creates a religion called Islam. Islam means submission. So if your hand is reaching out where it shouldn't, the cure is cut the hand off. So Yishmael actually created a religion that was like what they saw as the antidote to their own expanding in a way they shouldn't have. What did the other side, Esav, create? What they created was if they were about war, they said let's make a religion we call a religion of love. Whatever you do, it's okay. There's no rules anymore. There's no rules. It's amazing. They took literally the opposite thing to deal with their own qualities. while not balancing them properly, but putting whatever they believed was the antidote for their situation. Now, what was the proper approach? The proper approach was Jacob, Yaakov, Israel. He took the quality of giving of Abraham, the quality of restraint and boundaries of Yitzhak, and he put it into himself in what's called beauty, tiferes, and truth. And that is a line that when a person really balances, you're not all tilted to one side, tilted to the other side, but you really have your head on straight, and this is what's true, then that is the quality of Yaakov. And that's the concept of truth, and that can't be moved. Because yes, I'm a giver, but I don't give because I'm a people pleaser. And I don't give because I don't like my own boundaries. I give because it's the right thing to do. And, I have control. I have, I have restraint, but I don't restrain myself in a way that I shut down. I don't restrain myself that I restrain others. I say no because it's the right thing to do. That's the ultimate balance. Now, again, as far as our personalities go, everyone's different. It doesn't mean if you're not if you're a person that's naturally a giver or naturally more of a FOMO person that I have, I don't want to miss out, you could become whole by balancing it, by saying, if I'm the giver, I have to know to say no. And if I'm the person who's more introverted, I have to know how to get out sometimes. But the ultimate balance is Yaakov. He is, the balance of it, he's called truth. And that's why it's an amazing thing that happened, guys. And this is how, what I'm going to tell you, in unfolding events of history is just amazing. But if you look in the story of the Torah, when Yaakov was coming back, he ran away after he had got the blessings. He ran away. He was afraid of Esau. He ran away. When he came back, and there was a showdown between him and Esau. You know what Esau did before? If you look at the text, it says Esau went and he married the daughter of Yishmael. So what he tried to do is he tried to take the quality of himself, which was power and fighting, to the quality of Ishmael, which was this expansiveness. He tried to combine them to be able to battle Yaakov. And I want to tell you something that's even more amazing. And this is what it says in the prophecy in Ezekiel, that in the future, what's going to happen? There's what's called these, cataclysmic events that come in the end of days, and it talks about the Western world, which is the descendants of Esau, uniting with some of the Arab forces to come against Israel. That you can look in the prophecy in Yechezkel, in chapter 38 there, you can look, and that's what's describing. And what happens is, it's amazing. They want to come as to fight against the Jews, but what happens is at a certain point, their alliance crumbles. You know why the alliance crumbles? Because they want to go against the Jews, but then they realize, wait a minute, you don't agree with me either. So they turn around, you're an infidel. They got problems getting together. Because I don't know if you know this, but you realize this, like one of the reasons communism never works is because when everyone says, I'm going to be the leader, we're going to make this for everyone. We're all going to be equals, not, but then somebody wants to be in charge. And someone else wants to be in charge. Because when you can't really put people together if they're not working for a higher goal, when the goal is myself, I can't combine that because I really, yes, I'm saying communism, but I'm saying I want to be the leader. Okay, he wants to be the leader. So they really can't get together. They try to put together, but they really can't, because the only way to become truth is when you really put together all of the extremities, your giving and your restraint. It's balanced in a way that's for the sake of what's right, not for the sake of getting what you want to get. Now, here comes the last point I want to share with you. And this one is just really unbelievable. One of them one of them is well known. And one of them is not so well known. It's kind of discussed in the world. And it's not well known in the world either. But I heard it from one of my rabbis who said this was correct, and this is fascinating. And he brought it to us from a deep mystical teaching that talks about these two Jews. It's a very strange teaching. So, what is it teaching? The nations. We just start with Abraham. Abraham, in his kindness, look what happened. He became like the leader of the whole world, essentially, right? The Jewish people came out of Abraham. The Muslims on the other side of Abraham. The Christians on the other side. Not only that, this I can't tell you as a fact, but it's a conjecture, but it's probably true. It says that Abraham had other children. He sent them to the east and he gave them spiritual powers. And if you look historically, the Brahmin, which was the higher class in India, the timeline they show up in India is the same time that Abraham sent his children. The word Brahmin is Abraham. So most likely, the leaders of all of the different angles of the world came from Abraham. The Jewish people from Isaac and Jacob, Muslims on one side, Christians on the other side, and Eastern people on the other side. It's quite fascinating. But what I heard from one of my rabbis, Moshe Zatzal, he said that we know that JC was Jewish. He was a rabbinic student. He was a student of Yeshua Parachia, and he started making up his own ideas. And there was a fight between him and his rabbi, and his rabbi Yeshua Parachia chased him out, and he made up his own approach. So the world attached a religion to a Jew who had separated from the Jewish root. What people don't realize is that Islamic scholars, there are many Islamic scholars who claim that Muhammad's mother was Jewish. Now that would mean that by Jewish law, it goes after the mother. That would mean that Muhammad was actually Jewish too, which would mean it was the other Jew who went out of the system and people attached to him to try to find a way to get into the truth. But thank God you're all here saying, I want to get into truth. How do I do this? That's the beauty of it. We don't have to go and create new religions and new things. We have to just go with the true path that God gave us. I know somebody asked a question last week about the idea of being a Noahide, because it's strange because it's not a different religion. Everyone's a Noahide. It means that the descendants of Noah, the Jewish people have a mission. People who are in the world have a mission. It's not a separate religion. It's the idea of how do I express what is true to who I am. A Jewish person needs the 613 commandments to do it. A person who's not born Jewish does not need the seven, he or she needs the 7 commandments of morality. And that is the truth. That is the balance. It will balance you to the point where you're not going to be just giving uncontrolled, and you're not going to be limiting yourself uncontrolled. You'll be lined up with, I want to express what is true. These are the qualities of our personality. They're the way God set the world up, that we have to figure out what our strength is. Who are we? And balance it and make sure we get to wholeness. You can't be whole being lopsided. You got to be whole by balancing the two sides to coming out to the approach of truth, which was the approach of Jacob. And the world, which is creating wars and fighting, and what they're doing is they're grabbing on to different systems based on their own challenges. If I'm a person that doesn't know how to limit myself, so I can create a religion that you cut the hands off, but that I don't know. You have to hook into fixing up whatever challenges we have in ourselves to make sure that we are whole. And that's why this idea that I've expressed to you today, these 3 traits, which is called in Torah chesed, giving, gevura, boundaries and restraints, and tiferes, beauty or truth. These qualities are the qualities we need to find in ourselves, to balance ourselves, and the world needs to find in themselves. And without the world finding themselves, they're going to look for other things and try to combine things that won't go. And that's what I said to you in the story. At the end, they actually want to fight against the land of Israel and try to have a war to try to take control, because they can't admit what's true. And if you don't admit what's true, you don't deal with it that way, the people start doing other things that they see won't be successful, and it falls apart in the end because you can't combine things that don't stick. Okay, that's the thought, and we're going to open it up to questions, thoughts, and ideas. Everyone can unmute themselves if they want, I think. Yeah, so any questions or any comments about this or about anything else?
Rabbi, I do have a question. Thank you for a very incredible lecture. The idea of Isaac and his self-restraint and all of that, was that developed after the Akedah, or did the Akedah contribute to that? Because I would think he would, in order to allow himself to be bound and potentially killed by his father, would have required some restraint.
That's right. So 100%. The binding of Isaac is the ultimate display of that quality. That really is Isaac's. Isaac is very different than the others, because Isaac, once he reached that pinnacle of his life, by the Akedah, he's a very different person at that point. I mean, but that because he the quality of being binded at the offering was complete restraint, includes almost self-nullification. And once he hit that, he was almost out of this world. That's why he's not allowed to leave the land of Israel. He's called a pure offering. And that's also why in his life later on, he's blind. The reason why he's blind is because a blind person represents the idea of, like, how does a blind person go someplace? The way they go is they put their hand on the seeing person and they lead them. Isaac was like not really in this world. He was blind and just relying wherever God told him to go, because he had really reached this point of self-nullification, which is why he was blind in the spiritual sense of what it means, that he was somebody who relied on God completely. He wasn't the active person as we see someone like Abraham. He was more of the person who really had self-nullification to that point of willing to give himself up 100%. So you're 100% right. That is a place where you see exactly that trait of Isaac coming out in a very, very powerful way, maybe the most powerful way. Great question. What else we got? Any other questions we have? Raven.
Hi, Rabbi Ingber.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the class. I think I missed something that you said at the very end there. Would you just mind repeating, what did you say about when people are choosing a religion, they're pulled towards, they have a tendency to do what? I'm.
The idea was that the this is conjecture. What I'm telling you now is I haven't seen this in the text, but it makes sense. And actually, the first person who told me was one of my students. I was giving this class over, and he told me this, and it's a great point. What I said was that very often what people do is they look for the opposite way to deal with whatever challenges they have. That's what people do. Like if I'm whatever, this way I try to do the opposite, which makes sense. It's logic to it. But I'm saying that Yishmael's problem was the problem of not having the boundaries, because he got the good trait of Avram of being a giver, but it wasn't balanced.
Right.
So their religion is called submission. It's like almost the opposite. And Esau, he was a warrior, and it was Rome, which was the war machine. So they try to say, okay, let's call it all love, which is also an extreme. There's a big mistake, and I think you all could appreciate this. It's very important. I've said this many times, but there's in Christian thinking, there is a very, very problematic approach to how to deal with the idea of God being loving and the idea of responsibility. And that's why in Christian thinking, they create this idea of grace, which means that, like, okay, you don't have to do it. You know, there's no law anymore. The Torah has been canceled. You know, the verse says to free from the curse of the law, with the idea of that's not good. You see, that's not good. You don't want to be in a situation where, you know, like if your kids are helping you, and you know your kids are you know very little, and they're helping to do the dishes. So all you want is they don't break the dishes. That's really all you want. You don't expect anything from them. You don't want, it's just, you know, making them, you know, do some busy work so they feel good. And whatever. But when your kids get older, you want them to be productive. So you want to find a way to have them actually support them, that they can do something themselves, and you can help them get there. And sometimes you have to help them get there with sometimes a little harder, a little bit softer. That's what Hashem does for us. He doesn't say, you know what, you're nothing. You can't do anything anyway. It's okay. It doesn't matter what you do. Once I say that, once I say a concept, oh, yeah, you know, well, I love you so much, it doesn't matter what you do. If I say that, then I basically said you're nothing, because nothing you do is of worth value.
Right.
What I want to say, listen, no, you're very important and you're going to do important things. And so my goal is to help you. And therefore, if you're not successful, I'll find a way, and it may hurt sometimes because I have to bring out the good in you, but I'm going to find a way to help you be successful, that you really are helping to do the dishes. And it's not just a game. That is why it's very important. It's why there's an idea. It says, whoever says God says, it's called a vater. Whoever says God says, I don't care, whatever it is, fine. He gives up on his life. What does that mean? Because no, God is going to get you to where you have to go through the loving kindness of getting you there, but with the relationship that you have to get there. And if you made a wrong step, you know, you may burn your hand on the pot because you didn't wear the glove. Now you have to learn. But and this is why in Christian thinking they made a grave mistake, and it partly comes from, for a lot of reasons, but partly it's just not understanding how to read the text. But the idea of they had this thing of, oh, the Jewish God's a vengeful God. It's absurd. It's absurd. But what they don't realize is that to go and to take the opposite extreme of saying whatever you do is fine, that's not good. That's actually bad, because now what I've done is I've made it that whatever you do is meaningless. What I would love to see, and this is what Hashem does for us, the ideal would be to say, okay, you're gonna earn it yourself. And I'm going to figure out the ways to help you earn it. So you want to teach your kid how to, you know, earn the money, you know, to buy the car. If you just give them the Corvette when they're 16 years old, that kid wraps the Corvette around the tree. I mean, that's just what happens, you know? So what happens is I have to figure out a way that you're going to save a little money. I'm going to help you a little bit. Sometimes you're going to have to work a little harder. And then the kid says, I did it. And if the kid is smart, they realize, wow, my loving parent helped me get there. And sometimes it was challenges, and sometimes it was giving me my space, and stuff, but they help make it that I did it. That's the goal. So what I was saying before was, you know, both of these descendants from Shmuel and of Esav, so they had extremes, and they never balanced the extremes to become whole. And I said that the idea is that could be the things they took on was like antidotes to the opposite, but that's not healthy either. To call the religion, you have no, whatever you do is okay. There's the laws are all gone. Just whatever, you know, that's not healthy. To go and to say, well, submit because you are, it's another extreme.
I just have one more comment though. But the fact that they at least can recognize the extreme seems like a step up from a lot of things that I hear now, with especially a lot of younger people, like, oh, I'm just spiritual. Is that whole thing just more an issue of not recognizing the root issue of what's going, like, is that just step even lower than what you're describing? Does that question?
Well, as religions developed, and this is, again, we said before, we don't believe in religions, we believe in truth, but as people developed systems, there were practical reasons why they developed them. They developed them because people were stealing, and they said, well, we got to cut your hand off, otherwise you're going to steal. Like they had very pragmatic reasons why they wanted to create systems. The problem in America right now is that it's like, like when people, when they criticize Israel, one of the reasons they do it is because it's all Disneyland. If someone was invading America, everyone would say, just like, take them out. But in Israel, it's like, oh, it's Disneyland. Well, so you don't realize it. So people in America, America's got to the point of a wealthy country, and no one's dealing with reality anymore. So you could sit in your house and you could make up stuff about what you think the world is. And so literally, if you ask the problem in America, it's that right now, literally the Hollywood in that sense controls the thinking of Americans. So what do we think? We think that basically whatever you think you are, that's what you are. Because it's Hollywood, where there is no reality. People just make up what they want to make up. So is the situation very bad in terms of a disconnect from reality? Yeah, it's really bad. So I don't want to call it more or less, but like their challenges in the past were like, okay, we gotta pragmatically, if the country is seeing that everyone's stealing, they'll come, okay, let's cut people's hands, that's the. But here, when you can philosophize in the wealth of your comfort, I know we have some people here from Texas, I know. So, Texas as a border state has one approach. And people who are like living someplace else, I don't care, let everyone come in, because it's not reality to them. They can philosophize in their armchairs why it's really, that is what's the who needs borders. Great, good question. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas?
Rabbi, that was a profound answer. Thank you so much. This is Dan talking. I'm not getting any questions on YouTube or Facebook, but we've had roughly 80 viewers so far. But have you got any comment on the current situation in the Ukraine?
Look, I don't really, because where it fits in this, I don't exactly know. I'll tell you one thing. I don't know. This is me personally. I'm not. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. And she was in Auschwitz.
Yes.
And what was happening in Ukraine was very bad at the time. Very bad. It was very, very bad. She said the Ukrainians were, at the time, I'm not saying they're like that today, but back then she said they were like the Nazis. I'm not saying they are today. I don't know who they are today. But the situation where it's going to go and what's part of Russia, I don't know. It's not a. I think that the situation personally is, I think America has to figure out where America is at right now. Should America enter into this issue of, yes, Russia was, the USSR was a giant power. They want their imperial situation back, as would America. Can America, should they stop it? Can they stop it? How do they stop it? I don't know. I don't know if it's really. I think the bigger question is what America's position should be. Should they get involved? I mean, I don't know that they should fight a war for it. I don't think they should. But Russia has claims. Are they right?
Well, all I can tell so far is that the Russians are concerned that if the Ukraine joins a NATO alliance, the Americans are going to put missiles right there in the Ukraine, and that would be almost like the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 60s, where there was the threat of missiles being just off the coast of Florida. And
Right. Right. And I don't understand why, America didn't just say that. I saw one report that they could have guaranteed that they're not going to make them part of NATO. And I heard one general saying that that would not be a good idea to make them part of NATO. Country has a lot of corruption, a lot of issues, and do you want to make them part of this ally that you have to fight for? So I think that's a problem. I do think it's a problem. And I think America's got to be very, very careful here. We can get into a very, very messy situation that I don't know that we should.
Okay, I don't know if you can see the screen that we have, but we have a question coming here from Karen.
Karen Crew. Okay.
Hello, sir. How do we know how to balance ourselves correctly? Because like if I'm too kind and I try and go the wrong way, then I'm obviously going to go like Ishmael did instead of the correct way. So how do you learn to balance correctly?
Great. Okay, good question. So the first move is to learn Torah, which is what you're doing. The first move is to learn truth, because the way we have the mind is above the arms. And so when I start to learn what is right and how to look at the world, I start to change my whole opinion. So for example, I'm learning about aspects of Torah, aspects of the 7 laws of Noah. I learn about what's kindness and I learn about what's not. So for example, in America, and this is the kind of question Rabbi asked before, in America, we've taken a position over the years, something, when I was a kid, it was called tolerance, which was kind of a positive thing as far as America, what America was built on, and it switched to what's called relativism. Tolerance meant I disagree with you, but I tolerate you. America is based on the freedom of people to decide how they want to act. So I think I'm right. I think you're wrong. I tolerate you. I can't physically force you to change what you're doing. That's the definition of tolerance. That's the philosopher John Stuart Mills said what tolerance means. I tolerate, I disagree, but I tolerate you have your right to do your opinion. I might disagree and think it's terrible. It's wrong. America shifted afterwards into what's called relativism. This idea that how do I say someone's wrong? The truth is, whoever it's true for you. Well, that's not exactly true. If I have this cup, and one person says it's water and one says it's cyanide, I can't say, well, it's true for you. Because if it's cyanide and I start drinking it, then for me, it's water. Well, no, it's not. You're going to be in a lot of trouble. So the ideas of relativism in America have created this idea, a new form of accepting other things, and I don't believe anything. That's not true. So if you're a giver, once you start to learn, this is not okay, this is wrong, you can then know your proper response to the situation. But when we don't learn and we don't know, we live in a world where there's no truth, it's whatever you want it to be, so no one has an opinion. I call it people have such open minds that their brains fall out. That's what I understand this is. So what happens is the first step is you have to learn, because if your mind knows what's right, then there's 2 ways to make changes in life. There's 2 main ways to make changes. One is from the top down and one's from the outside in. Okay? These are 2 very, very important ways to make change. And I have some seminars coming up, and I invite you to those. We're going to do that. But there's different ways to do it. One is from the mind to the heart and actions. So that's when I learn something, I know it. Now I can say, okay, I always give, and now I know that this is a wrong thing. I'm not going to support this. If I give this person, I support them, I give them money, they're going to go and do bad things with it. Those things are bad. I cannot support that. The answer is no. So I learned, and my mind can now direct my actions because I have the knowledge and go from the head to the heart. The second way to change is sometimes we know things, but it's very hard for us to do it. But if you know a certain way to act is right, the second way to change is you do external actions that will affect your internal world. That's the second way to change. So for example, there was a study they did in a university where they went to study depression. So they had the students, they were pretending they were depressed and they got admitted into the hospital. Okay. And they were trying to do some study there. Now, the way that they pretended they were depressed was they put their head down, talked in a low voice, looked down, very slow. I'm really very depressed. And they talked like this. What happened? After 3 weeks, they had to stop this study. You know why? Because everyone became depressed, literally. So the second way that you change is that once you know what is the right thing and it's hard for you to do it, you do external actions and practice them until they'll affect your internal. So for example, let's say the person is you're not motivated, you're not so excited to do things, but you know you should be. So the old saying that say, fake it till you make it, there's truth to that. So if you're not excited about doing things, then say, oh, for this next short period of time, take a short thing. Because if you take a long term, you won't succeed. Take a short, for the next 2 days, I'm going to just talk really excited to people, right? If I'm very quiet and I talk very quietly to people, all right, I know I don't feel this way. I don't feel comfortable with this, but I'm going to act. I'm going to speak in a very outgoing way for 1 day. Once you start to do whatever it is that you feel you need to do, then it starts to infect the internal. So those are the 2 ways to change. One is the knowledge, then going from the head to the heart. Second one is once you know also what's the right thing to do, then if you act it in the physical world, it'll start affecting your personality and you'll start learning how to do that and it'll become second nature. Okay, does that make sense, Karen?
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful explanation.
My pleasure. Okay. Well, any other questions? I know it's normally, Rod does the questions afterwards. So right now I can open to any question on any topic. So I have another few minutes if anyone wants to ask on any other thing. I know people probably want to watch the Super Bowl soon. I'm not saying.
Hi, Rabbi.
I'll keep you too long.
I got a question for you on Aved Hashem.
Yeah.
And it relates to the mitzvot. And so it was basically saying, like, with the Emunah, like you have first level Emunah where you believe there's a God and he exists and things of that nature. But then it was relating the mitzvot to like the third level of Emunah, or maybe a little higher, fourth level, of where there's only God and like there's only Hashem. And so on the first level of Emunah, we can go and do mitzvots and think like, okay, we're doing this. But on the higher level of Emunah, it's where Hashem is actually directing our steps and presenting the mitzvots for us throughout our day. I just want your thoughts on that.
So, okay. So, I mean, I'm not exactly familiar with the way the person who taught that class is structuring it, because there's no place in Torah where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, but there are different levels of understanding information and how to understand relates to Hashem. There is a very, very, very high level, which is what you're referring to, which is the level called Ein Mavada, when a person comes to a moment where they realize somehow, some way, which we cannot live this way because it's not in our reality. The idea that there's nothing else but God. Now, the reason we can't live like that is because we exist, So what happens is that the idea is that there are moments where you could feel it, but you can't stay on that level. No one could live there. In other words, there are 2 parts. And this is what you're hitting on, Keith. It's a very important thing. And I talk about this a lot because it's very, very crucial. Sometimes you hear people saying, it's all meant to be. when someone says that, you got to watch out. Because it's all meant to be, then I don't have to do anything because it's all meant to be. And then the other person says, well, I got to do it. And then I'm doing it. And then they got out of the system. Both things are true. From our perspective, we must do. That is our essential mission in this world, is for us to act properly, to do. Now, we have to understand at the same time, there's somehow, some way that we cannot fully ever grasp that Hashem is orchestrating things as they have to be. But it works in tandem with our free will. So we do make the decisions. We are making the decisions. Somehow, some way, I don't know how. It's beyond what a person could understand. The concept of somehow there's nothing else other than God, as you're saying, is not a level that a person can live at. It's a level that's what's called Ratzov Shav. You could touch and you have to come back, touch and come back. There's actually a famous story like that. It happened, I think it was in World, it wasn't World War II. I don't remember when it was. It was a famous story of a rabbi. It may have been World War II. I don't remember. But there was a rabbi. He was in a truck, back of a truck with 7 of his kids and his wife and his kids. And I think it was during World War II. I don't know exactly. But he told the driver that when it was the Nazis, whoever was going to stop him, and he asked, what do you have in the back? Say nothing. There's nothing. I have nothing. So the driver's like, I'm going to get myself into trouble. It'll be all right. And then the way the story went was the rabbi told his wife and his children that just to meditate, focus on there's nothing else but God in the world, whatever that means. And when the Nazi, whoever it was, the story was, stuck his head in, he didn't see anything. Just missed him. Didn't see it. But those are things that you could touch momentarily. We're not supposed to live on that plane. We're supposed to somehow think that, and it's a very, very deep topic, the topic that all the mystics discuss, the Kabbalists discuss, and it's very, very complicated how we understand what it means, but we can't live that way. And we're not supposed to live that way. So somehow you have to understand that God is not limited in any way, shape, or form. That's a big problem. And I'll show you, it's kind of a little bit what we're talking about today in a certain sense, but there are religions that say God's out there and I'm here, and that creates a very bad limitation. God's in that place. That's not true. It says that God is the place of the world and the world is not his place, meaning that God is the existence that gives this world an ability to exist. Then you have the people in the East who say, well, everything's God. That's not true either. What does that mean? There are certain places that are holy. You can't make a blessing in the bathroom and different things. So from our perspective, we have to understand there's holy places, not holy places. There's some deeper way that we have to understand that when God creates the world, there is no limitation in any way, shape, or form. But we exist, and therefore we can't live in a world with that, whatever you call the 4th, 5th level of understanding of Emunah. That's a level to touch sometimes when you're praying, when you're thinking, but it's not a level you could stay at, because it's not the purpose of the world. The purpose of the world is to do your actions. Did I answer your question, Keith?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just had one more that I came up with after listening to you today about Isaac, basically like nullifying his will, like 100%.
Yeah.
From a question I think Sandy asked earlier. So how does that like correlate with him and making the decisions and stuff of that nature? Because if he's 100% nullified his will, then isn't he kind of in a sense waiting for the task at hand and then going and with the action and performing it? Or is he still making his own decisions in that way?
Well, it's really a corollary to your first question. It's very good. I mean, which is great, right? It means you're thinking about these things and they're relevant to you. Yitzchak had that quality more than maybe anyone else. However, he also understood the Torah is commanding us to live our lives in a certain way. So that's why the example I gave of being blind meant that he did everything he had to do, but he did it in a way where he was like, okay, this is what God wants me to do, and I'm tuned into that, but I'm still doing it because that's what God wants me to do. So he came from the perspective of, I nullify my will, but still the will that God has is for me to act in certain ways, and therefore I act in those ways. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. That's right on par with what I was kind of thinking.
Good.
So thank you.
Okay. I think that's-
Rabbi, was Moses nullified to that same point, or was he on an even higher level?
Well, Moshe in a certain sense is certainly the highest level prophet. And as I mentioned in last week's class, even the Mashiach will not be on the same level of Moshe's prophecy. So Moshe had a certain level. I mean, there are a lot of texts that kind of compare Moshe to the forefathers, who was greater in a certain way. But I think that's part of the difference. The forefathers were their qualities as forefathers. Moshe is called like he is what's called the sort of the mind of the people, in the sense that he by nullifying himself in his humility, he was able to get the whole Torah. So there is a sense of nullification also. By Yitzchak, it's a sense of nullification, the sense of him not being there. Moshe was so humble that therefore God's presence can reside in him fully, because to the degree that it's like if you have a cup and the cup is full, you can't fill it up with more water. So the person who's full of themselves, they really can't be open to anything. You can't learn a topic if you come to the class and you say, I know everything already. So all right, so you're not going to hear anything. It's not possible. So Moshe was. He's the humblest person. He saw himself as whatever, as almost not there. And therefore Hashem gave him, and that nullification of Moshe was the quality of humility, which was the most humble of all people. That is correct. Right? The verse tells us he was the greatest and the most humble, but his humility, you're right, is a direct correlation to the fact that he was given the Torah the way he was because he wasn't there. It was like, so in that sense, it's a similarity. I would say Yitzchak is more from the quality of gevura, of self-restraint, and Moshe is more from the quality of humility. Great questions. Gosh, wow. Very, very nice. Okay, everyone. Very good. Good
Excellent.
to see you all.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Ingber. Beautiful.
Thank you all. Hope to see you next week at 5:00, God willing.
Thank you.
Eastern time. Sorry, you're in Texas. It's 4 Eastern.
All right, everybody. So thank you for joining us on the No Hide World Center social media channels. Please come prepared to ask questions next week. Everybody was quiet in the questions today. We had plenty last week. Where's Veronica when we need her? All right. Now I get to go to sleep for the rest of the day because I got to work again tonight. So Rabbi Ingber, God be with you. Baruch Hashem.
And thank you, Dan. Dan's working at night doing very important stuff to help people. And then he stays up now to help broadcast this class. So
Yeah. I get in the bags under the eyes and the gray hairs more every day.
Good stuff.
Thank you all. Thank you for very much.
Thanks for being there, Ross. Considering Rod couldn't make it today, we appreciate your assistance.
No problem. I'm going to stop this recording here and then begin so he doesn't have to separate them lately. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.